Secondly, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, there is an opportunity, there's a chat bubble at the top of the screen, so feel free to post your questions, or we're going to open it up to questions at the very end. And finally, if you could mute your phones during the presentation to cut down on background noise, we would greatly appreciate it. So first of all, welcome again. Joining me today on the first slide on the call with me is Emily Johnson, and she is the Associate Director and Chief Operating Officer for the Institute of Public Policy at the Truman School of Public Affairs at the University of Missouri. And Bridget Sharp is joining me as well, and she is the Government Affairs and Industry Relations Manager for the National Professional Beauty Association, and we thank her. She is joining us today from Arizona. So with that, on the next slide, to just give some context, about 1/3 of all businesses in Missouri and the U.S. are owned by women. And we know that entrepreneurship and self-employment are really important avenues for women to scale up the economic ladder and pursue more flexible and rewarding careers. We've heard this time and time again in some focus groups that we've done. And that's why we partnered with the University of Missouri and Institute of Public Policy to release today some additional research briefs. But we also released in November of 2016 a really comprehensive study on the occupational licensing. And we wanted to keep digging deeper into the details so we can really come up with some solutions. And I will say that that report in November 2016 really scales professions ranging from cosmetology to architecture, so it's very wide. Regulations have expanded dramatically over the past 5 decades, and we know that women are more likely to have occupations that require licensing than men. And to put that into context, too, 28.1% of women in the U.S., according to 2015 report, women hold a license for their profession versus men, which is 23.2%. Our research also found that occupational licensing requirements we are really focused, and they intend to promote public health and safety, but they can actually restrict economic opportunity by making it harder for women to start new businesses or to enter new professions. Case in point, when it takes 20 times longer to become a licensed cosmetologist than an EMT, emergency medical technician, it's really time to evaluate how these licenses are actually working and not working for women and their families. So today, as I mentioned, we are releasing these research briefs to provide more detail. And let me give you a couple examples of what that means. So moving across state lines shouldn't mean losing your right to practice your profession, but that's exactly what it happens to many women who relocate, only to find that they find it really challenging to start and have to start from scratch to be able to enter their profession. So what we really want to accomplish with this work is to make it easier and to attract people to relocate to the state of Missouri or to start a new business. And finally, technology has really given consumers a great way to and tools to evaluate the quality of goods and services. So again, we're taking a look at that. In short, some cases we need to make licenses easier to obtain and keep when you move, and in other cases we need to evaluate the effectiveness of the licenses. We've actually shared these research briefs with Governor Greitens and the members of his task force on boards and commissions, which is a result of an executive order that he signed in April, Executive Order 17-11. So we've shared these research briefs that you are receiving and learning about today with this task force for a final report that's due on his desk on October 31st. Also to point out, the Kauffman Foundation recently released and looked at some research. In 1977, more than 2 out of every 10 U.S. startups, new businesses, were in rural areas. And today, according to the Kauffman Foundation, that number is just 1 in 10. So again, really seeing a reduction in small businesses launching in rural communities, which we want to, again, reduce barriers and to be able to create more entrepreneurship throughout the state of Missouri. So with that kind of brief highlight, I would like to turn it over to Emily Johnson. Again, on the call, she was the lead researcher with the team at the University of Missouri's Truman Institute of Public Policy to really talk more about the research findings. So Emily.
Great. Thank you very much, Wendy. We'll go to the next slide. Yes, very good. So I appreciate the opportunity to present the findings from our most recent research on occupational licensing. And as Wendy mentioned, in the U.S., occupational licensing requirements have increased dramatically. In the 1950s, only about 5% of the workforce held an occupational licensing, to about 26% holding a license in 2016. We also found that employed women are more likely to hold a certification or license than employed men, and more likely to work in occupations that require a license. Our research indicates that licensing requirements can create barriers for individuals to enter the licensed professions. To the next slide. Our research in the last year included a further examination of 2 issues related to occupational licensing, including reciprocity and alternatives to licensure. Starting with reciprocity. Reciprocity is the policy and process of accepting an individual's license from another state. The Institute analyzed 139 professions licensed in Missouri and neighboring states, and 41% of those professions were licensed by only one state. Because each state sets their own standards for regulating professions, there are large disparities across the nation. These disparities among states can create barriers for people in licensed professions to re-enter the same profession in another state. And the next slide. Our research also examined alternatives to occupational licensing. We found that alternatives like certification, registration, and others have lower requirements than full licensure. And in professions where the risk to public safety is low, these alternatives could provide an effective and less burdensome alternative to full licensure. With the introduction of new and innovative services like Uber and Airbnb, these services are expanding the way consumers make choices, largely based on the ratings and experiences of other consumers. And it's opening the door for policymakers to re-examine regulations of these industries. Next slide. The research has identified several policy considerations which could provide opportunities for policymakers to address some of the barriers related to occupational licensing. The first is that a thorough cost-benefit analysis could be conducted through sunrise or sunset statutes to provide valuable information to policymakers considering occupational licensing reform. The cost-benefit analysis consists of an investigation to determine the risk to public safety if the occupation were to go unregulated, and the costs associated with introducing the regulation. Next is the expansion of reciprocity. Reciprocity could be expanded through national or regional compacts to make it easier to transfer licenses between states and reduce barriers for new residents. States could reduce or waive fees for low-income job seekers. These waivers could be provided to low-income populations who do not have the resources to afford licensing fees. And finally, consistent and transparent data collection and data sharing could help administrators, policymakers, and the public identify issues and trends to find efficiencies and improve systems. Thank you. Wendy, are you there? Is Wendy there?
Yes. Thank you, Emily.
You're welcome.
Thank you. To give some additional context to the research brief, I'd now like to introduce to you Bridget Sharp. And Bridget is the Government Affairs and Industry Relations Manager with the National Professional Beauty Association, again located in Arizona. So Bridget, welcome and enlighten us a little bit.
Well, thank you so much, Wendy, and thank you to the Women's Foundation for inviting the Professional Beauty Association to be a part of this exciting rollout. Again, I'm Bridget Sharp. I'm with the Professional Beauty Association. We are a national trade association with members representing salon and spas, distributors, manufacturers, as well as the licensed professional, which we're talking about today. Our first priority is to bring our members the resources needed for them to achieve success within the industry. As you can see by this great chart on your screen, we're incredibly proud of the high number of women-owned salons, both in Missouri and nationwide. This chart looks very similar in the other 49 states as well. And we would love to see this number just continue to grow. And the way to do that is through reform. So if we would like to move on to the next slide, I'll talk to you a little bit about what we are proposing. So beauty professionals, we already lead the way in styles and trends, and our contribution to a sustainable, growing economy surpasses many other career choices. Through important reforms, we are creating career opportunities, protecting our cosmetology students from excessive student debt, guiding students into the workforce faster, and supporting our licensed professionals. We also have a responsibility to help employers meet the demands of a growing industry while also maintaining the high standards that protect and serve the public through licensing. So accomplishing these goals requires streamlining of standards relating to licensing, education, and testing. Our main focus right now is on license reciprocity as well as reducing hours for licensure. In regards to license reciprocity, it's obviously important to us to keep the cosmetology license in place because there are far too many health and safety concerns that go along with deregulating completely. And there should never be a restriction on someone's ability to earn a living. So this license mobility is critical to growing a stronger beauty industry. Passage of license mobility legislation would allow our licensed professionals in good standing to move freely, taking a valid license with them to a new part of the country, like Missouri. We aim to mimic Arizona's reciprocity qualifications, and there are two ways to earn reciprocity in Arizona, through license for license or through examination. They make it really easy to come to Arizona to work. Right now, Arizona requires 1,600 hours of education. However, folks in New York and Massachusetts who went to school for 1,000 hours are able to come to Arizona and their license is recognized. So we would like to see that happen across the country. Additionally, we want to reduce hours required for licensure. We want to see that streamlined into one standard set of hours, specifically 1,000 hours, to complete a cosmetology program and become licensed by the state. Our research shows higher curriculum hours only lead to a negative impact on student performance, stylist financial stability, and the industry's talent pipeline. We've also seen great examples of reform through hair braiders across the country. PBA does support the recent move to registration or certification in place of hair braiding licensure. We believe it is not fair to force a hair braider to complete a full cosmetology license in order to provide services, since in many instances, curriculums do not even include hair braiding. So this is just another way for us to show our support for reform. It's just so important, and we hope to see this continue through cosmetology licensing reform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bridget. Before we open it up for questions, just to recap on a couple of things. First of all, the research briefs that are released today, you can access those on the Women's Foundation's website, and the web address is womens-foundation.org/research. So take a look at that and take a deeper dive into the research briefs. And then to just recap some of the policy considerations, again, good cost-benefit analysis, reciprocity, reducing licensure fees for low-income job seekers, and then good data collection is something that at the Women's Foundation we're really focused on and want to work with our policymakers on both sides of the aisle to really start to collect good data for the state of Missouri so that we can really look at trend lines and then further develop some solutions. So with that concludes the overall presentation. I'm sure you have questions. Please unmute your call, your phone line, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Hi, it's Jeff Fox. Are you guys there?
Yes. Hello, Jeff.
Yeah, it's Jeff Fox, the Examiner in Independence. I guess Independence, Missouri. Just a quick question is, do you have anyone lined up in the General Assembly to carry legislation to move some of this forward in 2018?
Yes, good question. Actually, we do. Representative Ross, there was a House bill introduced last year, House Bill 609, and we are working with him to work on some legislation for 2018 General Assembly.
Okay. What would 609 have done?
That was going to be the sunrise provision. And that's something that, again, from the cost-benefit analysis perspective, that we think is extremely important. And again, that would be the evaluation of any new licensed profession would go through a pretty stringent cost-benefit analysis to really assess, do we actually need this new profession?
Okay. And you want to see that get another chance in 2018?
Yes, we would like to. We also would love to see some legislation around reciprocity. Again, we haven't put the finishing touches on who may be interested in potentially carrying that, but that is something, too, that we're working on.
It takes 2 or 3 or 50 to have reciprocity. I mean, is there some sort of clearinghouse among state legislatures to kind of work on that?
And this is actually something too that is part of, we're hoping could be a part of the governor's task force analysis. So yeah, I would say on that particular, on the reciprocity and carrying that, stay tuned for more information on that one.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other questions? Any other questions for us? Okay, great. If not, again, thank you for joining us. The research briefs, again, is accessible through the Women's Foundation's website. You see it listed here on the screen, and it's /research. And again, you can stay connected with us through our social media work, too. So thank you so much for your interest and support and for joining us today. Have a good day.
Thank you.